Okay, finally. So sorry. Listen, thank you for this invitation. Carlo was the first person to connect me with your group. I had not heard of your group before, and for that I am sorry, but I am so glad to have this invitation to participate. And I hope that what I have to reflect on will build upon the many workshops and so on. I'm delighted with the titles that I see in there. I'm excited about the creativity and innovativity that is reflected in them. And I wish to say, let's go forward and let's see what we can do. Now, I've titled this, Don't Waste a Good Crisis. And you say, that's a strange title. There's no crisis that's good. Well, let's think about it. Sometimes when we have a crisis, it's telling us that something is wrong. And in this respect, learning how to transform crises from dangers into opportunities. And one of the young ladies just a few moments ago talked about going from dangers to opportunities, to make transitions to equitable, sustainable, and livable societies. So in that context, here's a picture of me in one of my favorite places out in the woods. I love being in the woods, being with nature. And some of you know, in 1992, I started a journal called the Journal of Cleaner Production. And certainly many of you have published excellent articles in that journal, and I'm delighted, and I hope that we can make a difference. Now, is there a way that I can minimize the pictures on the side here? Okay, yes. What have we learned from the COVID pandemic? Well, among other things, we've learned that we're all interconnected and interdependent globally, and interdependent upon the biosphere upon which we're totally integrated. And why do I say don't waste a good crisis? I say that because frequently in some of the previous crises, for example, the pandemic of 1918, which killed more than 300 million people, we're very, very slow in reacting. So we need to look carefully at what are the challenges that this pandemic has created and react. And there have been many, many, many innovative ways of reacting. Among them, I'm sitting in my home desk and I'm not over there with you. Honestly, I would like to be over there with you, but that's one of them. Okay. Now, what's meant by a crisis or crisis? What are some of the crises we need to face? What can we learn from COVID and other crises? What can be done to make socioeconomic systems that are more flexible and resilient to anticipate and to respond to such crises? And in the context of being educators, there are many kinds of changes we've had to make. How can we improve our online education and training? How can we perform research when getting into physical laboratories is more and more difficult? What can we do to reduce the probability and severity of future crises? And how will these new approaches help us to accelerate the transition to equitable, sustainable, livable societies? These are kinds of questions I hope that you and all of your participants will be thinking about as you present and as you plan to move forward. Now, what's meant by a crisis? In Greek, it's krisis. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, or krino, meaning decide and turning point. We've got a turning point here that we need to focus on. And in that respect, the crisis is a moment to make a different direction. Also in Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, there are two characters. The characters are different. I take the one in Chinese, which is Huisingh, which is comprised of two characters, the one of danger, and this is my danger in the sky, and opportunity. So they also have been looking at crises in the way of, yes, it's a danger, yes, it's a challenge, but yes, it's an opportunity. Now I'm going to look in depth at a few of the crises that we must look at that are interconnected with the COVID-19 pandemic. One of them is climate related. And you've seen many, many aspects about it. One of the
Professor Huisingh.
Yes.
Okay, now we hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm
Is
sorry.
it possible that you put your hand on the microphone?
Okay, here I hope not, but okay, thank you for warning. Anyhow, of course, there are several other greenhouse gases, but looking at the observatory in Mauna Loa, Hawaii, here are the data of the CO2 concentrations from about 1958 or so on up to 1919. And you see how inexorably it's going up, up, up. And you see the sinusoidal wave there reflecting the difference between summer and winter CO2 concentrations. And with that, we see the increases in temperature. And those have continued to go up too. And in this respect, I wish to show you this dynamic slide where we have a number of dimensions all integrated. The seasonal parameters, the southern hemisphere, the equatorial and the northern hemisphere, and the CO2 concentrations, fluctuations. And in this context, we will see one of the biggest driving challenges we have behind viral pandemics and other kinds of challenges. And this I want to use to set the context for our deliberations for the next days. Because this is the most existential parameter that is interconnected with COVID crises or other viral disease crises, food insecurity crises, hacking, and many, many other crises interconnected. Now, as we go, now we're going to go back in time and to the pre-industrial era of around 278 parts per million of CO2, or go back even further into the ice age of around 185 parts per million. So putting our current concentrations in context, this helps us to realize what has happened, especially since the Industrial Revolution. And look what it was in 2019 and 2020. 409, 417. approximately 8 parts per million increase per year during those 2 years. And if we continue at that rate, by 2040, we will have 584 parts per million. Imagine the impact upon the global climate. Already we're having increasing droughts, increasing forest fires in many, many parts of the world, including even in Siberia. And this is a trend in the relation to multi-billion-dollar storms. And notice how the frequency has increased. This doesn't show the severity, but that they're multi-billion-dollar storms emphasizes and underscores the increasing severity at the same time. There are many different kinds of natural disasters. Of course, flooding related to storms is one of the biggest ones, but earthquakes, extreme temperature, etc. So our danger in the sky monster is out there challenging us. Now, I'm going to, in many times, look for opportunities. And one of the opportunities is in the 2015 Paris Agreement, where 196 parties agreed to work to keep the temperature below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. That is an encouraging co-working. And increasingly, many of these parties are making individual commitments to making a difference. And this is that 2 degrees centigrade budget that was set somewhat arbitrarily, I would say. But nonetheless, that budget, as you see, is getting eaten up and increasingly rapidly. Notice I'm playing it for the second time. See how rapidly it is increasing in rate of change. And that's one of the biggest crises we have. Now, there are many pluses, many opportunities for doing many of the kinds of things we need to do to transition from the fossil fuel systems to the post-fossil fuel systems, and many other kinds of things. So there are many possibilities and many attributes for clean energy jobs. And there's something strange here. Okay. Not sure what's happened here now. I don't know if, okay. I see a block here and I can't seem to move it. In any case, there are many net zero companies and that are now evolving, whether in buildings, communities, financial institutions. More and more are making commitments to, yes, we're going to make the changes we need to make. I'm sorry, something has gone wrong again. Can you see it? Hello?
Yeah, yes,
Yes, we see it.
Okay, the thing of it is there's a rectangle that keeps popping up. Okay. For some reason, there are some rectangles that aren't supposed to be here. One of the other challenges is definitely—
Professor Huisingh, we don't
Yes.
see that rectangles. We
You
don't
don't
see them.
you don't see them.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad you don't. They're blocking part of my slides. I don't know where they're coming from, but I'm okay. Speaking of the drivers for change and or the drivers of the crises. The human population continues to increase at approximately 81 million net increase. That's 1.35 times the population of Italy, Carlo. And imagine that as a driver. We can improve our efficiency, energy efficiency, and materials efficiency. But unless we also address this, the crises will continue. And it's not allowing me to change slides. I don't know, I've never had this problem before. Okay, there it has. Now I want to show this about the population growth from the Han Dynasty and earlier. And just to save time, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So we'll make time go faster. Notice we got the first billion, and notice how rapidly the subsequent billions are being added. And my question to you, on a planet that isn't getting bigger, in fact, it's getting smaller due to melting of the ice caps and sea level rise, I sometimes say, what about tomorrow? Where are we going to go and how are we going to get there? What about tomorrow? What about tomorrow? What about population control as part of the whole system? In the book Drawdown, there are many excellent ways to help us to draw down the CO2 concentration and, in fact, do something about human population. The most important one on air conditioning and refrigeration, shifting to wind turbines, reduce food waste, plant-rich diets. But notice number 6 and 7. Educate girls and family planning. Unfortunately, in many parts of the world, young girls are not allowed to go to school, or because of poverty, their parents can't afford to send them, they send the boys to school. Thus, the learning about family planning and having the wherewithal to make families that are planned isn't there. And that's part of what's contributing to that 81 million net increase in Homo sapiens on the planet per year. If we don't address this along with the others, the virus-like crises and other ones will continue to come as well. Now, another of the crises, spreading deserts. Notice the amount of loss of agricultural land and or of villages, and how it has increased, for example, in China, Afghanistan, Iran, etc. And as these deserts continue to spread, we have increasing food insecurity because many of those regions were fertile in the past. And many areas of forests have been burned and are being burned. And we're losing many species. So we're getting into biodiversity vulnerabilities as well. Now, what kind of opportunities do we have in this? Well, among others, multi-species reforestation, not monoculture, but multi-species. So we have a diversity. They are less vulnerable to diseases and other kinds of things. There are many advances in net regenerative agriculture. And there are many, many ways of transitioning from the fossil fuel-based systems to the renewable energy ones. And certainly in the whole area of artificial intelligence, IoT, issues of cybersecurity, cyber insecurity, and so on. All of these are areas where we're going to need to use the best of those kinds of tools to help us with regard to improving our production and our consumption and reducing our wastages in all levels, and certainly new political approaches. Another of the crises we have are economically related crises. As we know, globally, the richest 20% of the nations and of the people within nations have the majority of the wealth and the other percentages. And in this recent COVID pandemic that we've been facing, notice the workers' salary went up 1.8, but get who got the most increase? Many of those who are already making millions. That kind of diversity. And then a very severe gender diversity problem. The pay gaps. Notice the pay gaps between male and female. And that is another of our challenges. Unless we can make this more gender equity throughout, we will continue to have other problems. And notice, of the 500 richest, 1.8 trillion was added to their wealth, and Bezos is one of the ones. 26 billionaires own the same as the equivalent of 3.8 billion. A new economic system is needed, according to Oxfam, and I certainly agree. There's an inequity that we've got to wrestle with, and until we do that, we also are going to continue to have problems. Now, among the things that are helping us and can help us are shifting from the linear, use it once and throw it away mentality of our linear economy to the circular economy, both from the biospheric materials, but also from the technical materials that we mine from the earth. There are ways to close the loops, and decoupling, therefore, economic activity from our use of finite resources, designing waste out of the system and transitioning to renewable energy sources that are also equitable. Natural economic, both building economic, natural, and social capital based on three principles: designing waste and pollution out, keep products and materials in use, and having net regenerative systems approaches. And there's much advance in that. Another part is divesting from paying subsidies to the fossil fuel companies to search for and extract more, and invest in renewable energy. And the divestment movement is growing rapidly in many, many dimensions and many, many parts of the world. So if the investments aren't in the oil and gas companies and coal companies, but for the alternatives, we are going to be making a difference. So invest instead in climate solution related approaches. And that is the kind of effort that can really make a difference. And within that, there are a number of organizations that you might access, and they're listed there, where you can learn much more about divestment and about groups that are working on this transition. What do we envision as a future for our future? What kind of vision? What kind of vision? Where are we going on this planet? And what about making sure that we don't pass our current problems on to the next generation? What will those future societies look like? This is one artist's vision of the future. That's very different from those living in urban jungles. What a beautiful sight. How will they function differently? How will we achieve such societies? How will we know if we have achieved them? And how will we know if we haven't? That will require that we have to have enough vision and stick-to-itiveness to continue to work, because it's not going to happen that quickly. We've got to continue to work together, and this is why groups such as yours can be the leaders in many ways of working together regionally and globally. And I thank you for all of the work you have done and the work you will be doing. We need indicators, new governance, education, values, technologies, and economics to monitor, to guide, to steer in new directions. So what about our people? Where are we going? How will we go? Know that sustainable development is an integral of ecological and
Professor Huisingh, we don't hear.
Yes.
Okay. No, we hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm speaking loudly. Maybe I'll speak even more loudly. Thank you for warning me. Notice that our society is built upon natural capital, the natural resources, the ecosystem resources, and yes, the beauty of nature, the aesthetics, as well as all of the pragmatic aspects, then the social capital, and finally, the capital in infrastructure and money and so on. Let's keep in mind that in those interconnections, or as Bo Shalin from the Swedish EPA put it, into this diamond of sustainability. Notice how interconnected everything is. And that interconnection needs us to help to look at things from a systems perspective, an integrated systems perspective. Another part that we have the opportunity to work on in an integrated way is to see how these 17 Sustainable Development Goals and all of the subheadings under each of them can help us to look more integratively, more systems-wide, more working together instead of competing. Find a way to cooperate, to collaborate, and of course, through communication. And that's what this conference will help us to facilitate further communication. So, are we ready and willing to take the necessary steps? There are lots of steps, and there are more crises that need to be looked at, but I didn't highlight all of them. We as educators, predominantly, I believe, participants are educators and students. We're going to need some new thinking about how we educate, what we do in education. There will definitely need to be some paradigm shifts, not continuing bigger is better, more is better, richer is better, faster is better, but alternatives. Definitely new policies at the academic level, at the governmental level, at the corporate level. And for sure, new technologies, and they are evolving, and there are many innovative responses to COVID-19. Some of them are technical. Definitely new kinds of management skills and approaches and strategies, and new cooperation in ways that we haven't been cooperating. And your group is facilitating many new ways of cooperation. My compliments. Definitely, basically different values. The King of Bhutan talked about the importance of a balance, and in that respect was one of the leaders of talking about gross national happiness is far more important than gross national product. That's part of the difference. And their pillars in Bhutan: good governance, balanced economic development, not just economic development at all costs, environmental preservation, and preserve and promote culture. A balanced set of pillars. I ask you to look up and study some of these indices of alternatives to gross national product or gross domestic product. The happiness index, the wellness index, the inclusive wellness, wealth, happiness, world happiness index, happy planet index, etc. I invite you to look at them, study them, and compare them. Notice the people behind them who are saying the old get richer, faster, bigger, more isn't doing it. The inequity that's resulted from that and continues to get worse isn't doing it right. They have come up with these alternatives.
We don't hear you. Okay.
How many minutes do I have left?
Okay. Now we hear you.
So the question is, how do we make the transition to equitable, sustainable, livable post-fossil carbon societies? How will we achieve that goal? And will we achieve it soon enough? Towards a well-being economy that serves people and nature, not super rich fat cats. Building a human environment that is socially just and ecologically sustainable. So what can we learn from history? What can we learn? In fact, can we learn? Sometimes I'm not so sure. Socrates said, the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Let's go about building some new paradigms and new policies and new technologies. Our friend Albert said, if mankind is to survive, we shall require a substantially new manner of thinking. And one of his buddies, E.F. Schumacher, we must begin to see the possibility of evolving a new lifestyle with new methods of production, new patterns of consumption, a lifestyle designed for permanence. Our present lifestyle is designed for planned obsolescence. Use it once and throw it away. whether it's plastic bags or computers or whatever. One of our senators was one of the leaders in many ways, and she talked about her second lesson. I'm not sure what the first one was, but she was talking about crises. What had been impossible becomes hard, but may be possible. That's the moment to fight with everything you've got, to make the changes. And we are facing and must face a series of crises, change them from the dangers that they are, and many of them getting worse, to opportunities. I ask you, are you ready? Are you willing to take the necessary steps to fight, as Elizabeth said, to make the difference? Or as Greta said, no one is too small to make a difference. Notice how much impact she's had and is having. You must unite behind the science, not the anti-science, which is rising, and the anti-vaxxers that are rising, and the neo-fascists that are rising, but cooperation, collaboration, democracy. You must take action. Giving up is never an option. So what about our future? It's in our hands, it's in your hands. Thank you very much.